Howdy everyone, and welcome back to The More You Grow. Summertime is in full swing here in Texas. It's 102 degrees today. Believe me, it feels like it's a lot hotter than that. One of my favorite ways to get refreshed and to get hydrated in the summer heat is to dive into a nice, juicy, sweet watermelon. I'm sure there's many of you out there that will agree with me there. But how do you know when you're choosing a watermelon if you're going to end up with a nice, sweet, juicy watermelon, or if you're going to end up with a bland, disappointing watermelon that can be found in stores sometimes? Well, come along with me in this video and I'm going to show you things that I look for when choosing a watermelon that I've learned coming from a long line of watermelon farmers, and things that I learned during my time in my master's degree in horticulture at A&M. So let's go check it out. So there's some people that are surprised that there's more kinds of watermelon than just red watermelons. There are yellow, there are orange watermelons, and they all have their own unique flavor, their unique sweetness. And so I really encourage you to try to find different kinds of watermelon to see if there's other kinds that you may like. This right here is a Jubilee watermelon. This is one of the most common ones you're going to find in the store and at farmers markets, just because they grow so easily. And this one does have seeds. This isn't a seedless watermelon. If you'd like to learn how they make seedless watermelons, leave it down in the comments, because it is a very unique and a very cool process on how they develop a seedless watermelon. So I'd be happy to talk about that if that's something you're interested in. My favorite variety are the yellow fleshed watermelons. And the reason why I like them, they just have more sweetness, they have more depth of flavor, and I just love them. The reason why you don't see them in the store as often is because they don't ship as well. They have a thinner rind on them, and it causes them to bust more often, especially if they stack them high in those bins like you see at the store. So check your local producers, see if you can find a yellow flesh variety, because I think you'll love the experience if you haven't tried it before. I personally grow an orange variety of watermelon most years. It's called Orange Glow, and I love it because it has such a beautiful flavor, has a beautiful color. It looks like orange soda orange. It has a tropical sweetness to it, and it's just so unique compared to other watermelons that you get. But today I'm going to be talking about your average red flesh variety, just because this is what people are going to find most often. But the things I'm going to show you today will apply to the other varieties of watermelon as well. So let's get into the 3 ways I look for a sweet watermelon. One way that watermelons are different than a lot of fruit is they do not get sweeter after they're picked. They will not ripen, they will not get sweeter if you let them sit longer, and it'll just get softer really. The reason why is the watermelon gets all of its sugar from the plant. So once you cut it off the vine, it is as sweet as it's going to be in that moment. And unfortunately, a lot of times when you go to the store, they have to be picked a little bit green, so that way they're still good by the time they get to the store. And really, that's how I end up with more disappointing watermelons than anything, is going to big box stores to get them. I always do my best to shop local and find local producers in my area that grow watermelons, and they pick them when they're ready to be picked, when they're at their optimal sweetness. So if you got a farmer's market around or a fruit stand, that's where I would recommend to go looking for a good watermelon. The first thing I look for when choosing a watermelon is I look for something right here on the stem, and this one has it really well. So let me bring you in a little closer and I'll show you what I'm looking at. The first thing I always try to find on a watermelon when choosing a nice sweet watermelon is looking for this black residue on the stem. What this is this is crystallized sugar from inside the watermelon. That means this watermelon is so sweet that the sugar is dripping out of the stem and it's drying on the outside. So this is crystallized sugar from inside the watermelon. That is always the first thing I look for, because if that's there, you've got a pretty good shot of having a nice sweet watermelon. So look for the black residue coming from the stem. That is just sugar. That's not anything bad. That is so much sugar inside that watermelon that's dripping out of the stem. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times you're not going to see these sugar crystals in store-bought watermelons, just because a lot of times they're cleaned up if they were ever there, but more often so because they're not picked at this optimal sweetness. I got this from my local farmer's market, from my good friend that runs that. He grows these watermelons himself, can tell you everything about them, and he always picks them at the optimal sweetness. So I can usually find a very good watermelon very easily from my friend here in town. So what happens if you can't find the sugar crystals on the outside of your watermelon? There's a few other things that you can look for when trying to find a nice ripe watermelon. This is one that most people have heard of and actually do a lot when they go in the store. It's not foolproof, but it gives you a good sign of ripeness. You hear that sound? Sounds like a good drum, doesn't it? Pick it off the table a little bit, maybe you can hear it better. You hear that thud? That means this is a good ripe watermelon. If they're underripe, it will not have that hollow thud sound. So this is what I see people do most of the time in the store, and this is what's most common. This is a good way to test for ripeness, but it's not always a good way to test for sweetness. So another way that I use to check a watermelon is look at the bottom. You see on the bottom of this watermelon how it has a yellowish color. It has kind of a discolored look compared to the top. This means this watermelon was allowed to ripen in the field longer than a lot of watermelons are left. So if you ever see a perfectly even watermelon that's got perfect skin on it, that usually means it was picked before it was fully ripe. A good, ripe, sweet watermelon will have a little bit of discoloring on the bottom where it's been allowed to ripen in the field. So those are the three things that I look for when choosing a good sweet watermelon. Look for the sugar crystals on the stem. That means this watermelon is so sweet, got so much sugar content inside that there's sugar dripping out of the stem and crystallizing on the outside. The second thing you look for, listen for the sound. If you got that good hollow sound inside, that means it's going to be nice and ripe. It's not going to be underripe. Doesn't tell you how sweet it's going to be, but usually a good ripe watermelon has a better odds of being sweet than a green unripe watermelon, if you know what I mean. The other thing to look for is look for a little bit of discoloration on the bottom. If you see this yellow belly is what they call it. You see a yellow belly on a watermelon, that means it was allowed to ripen in the field. Didn't get picked too early. If you find watermelons that are perfectly even on the outside, there's no discoloration, they just look like a picture perfect watermelon skin, oftentimes you're going to end up with less sugar content or less ripeness in a watermelon like that. This yellow belly means it was allowed to ripen in the field longer than it would be if it was picked to go to a big box store. So that's the things you can look for. You can use these methods when trying to pick a watermelon from a big box store. You can find that yellow belly oftentimes. You can get that sound. A lot of times you're not going to see that sugar content, you're not going to see sugar crystals, but every so often you can see that as well. I always recommend for people to go out to their local producers, their local farmers markets, their fruit stands, their local growers, because they're going to pick these at the optimal ripeness. They're going to have pride in their product, so they're going to want to make sure to give you the nice sweet watermelons are as nice and sweet as they can get them. And you can talk with that grower and talk about how the watermelons are doing this year, how the plants are growing, what kind of sweetness can you expect from their watermelons, where you can't get that going to a big box store. So check for those three things, and hopefully that'll make you the hit at the next barbecue or the next outdoor gathering where you bring a good watermelon that everyone can enjoy. So if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you have any more questions for me about how to choose a good sweet watermelon, or if you have any questions about the different kinds of watermelons, leave it down in the comments and let me know what your favorite kind of watermelon is. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Go check us out on Facebook and Instagram, and hit that bell icon for notifications. Until next time, I hope you'll join me right here on The More You Grow.